Welcome to session 48. And we continue with, I guess, 9 more Chinese characters from where we stopped last, which in Chinese they are 故有无相生难易相成 again 故有无相生难易相成 So in English, what does that mean? Again, my own personal take would be those believe that they don't have only because they are aware of or acknowledge of somebody else do have. And the more difficult things only exist because by comparison to the things that are considered easier. So basically, I guess this part I think is somewhat easier to be related to because, we always want what we don't have. And we only know what we don't have because we were, I guess, aware of that somebody else did have, right? So by comparison, it's like, so we're, basically short of something. If you never know, there are some, different lifestyle out there and you're pretty happy. You don't need a bigger house. You don't need, fancier car. I do remember when I was, growing up in the communist China, where supposedly everybody was equally poor, having a bicycle, new or used, was something really a big deal. And the first time I got myself a wristwatch, that was, quite something. For me to, become a grown-up actually start to work, because otherwise how would you afford, be able to afford one? So that was, pretty simple life. And we didn't know we were poor, okay? Because, throughout the whole country, everybody was equally poor. Basically, we didn't have nothing, apparently my parents or my grandparents never told me what was it like, before the communist rule. So anyway, the Chinese of my generation growing up, we didn't know we were poor. And as far as the material things goes, I didn't really have anything like, I got a big plan. I got to own this. I got to own that. There was no opportunity because back then, one, you do not necessarily get a job and nobody applied for a job. Nobody back then, like my parents, all their life, they never had an interview, job interview. They never had one. It was the job allocated by the government. I started that way too. My first job was allocated too. It's not like you apply, you get a job interview and then you present your credential and all that. It didn't work like that. So, that part was pretty much, up to the government, the planning. I was lucky because the radical communism ended. So, my political family background was no longer a concern, for the employers. So I got a job. And then I was, able to afford, first a bicycle and then a watch. Man, I thought I was already, somewhat, I didn't have the concept of rich, but, I was like very, very happy. Of course, once coming out of it or coming away from that hardcore communist system, of course, China eventually changed too from that time. But, coming back to the point is, if you didn't know what you didn't have, and back then in the hardcore communist China, there are a lot of things we didn't know we didn't have, right? So if you didn't know what you didn't have, you're less, I guess, unsatisfied as far as the material things. I do remember, the rent and the utility bill put together every month for my parents. Uh, Actually, two apartments together right next to each other. It was probably a couple of dollars per month. You know, that was beautiful life. I mean, we didn't have anything to complain about as far as the material things went. Yeah, it was pretty much, basic needs satisfied. Of course, now I guess the contemporary Chinese get greedy. They need bigger, better, whatever, apartments or houses. If anyone could afford a house in urban society of big metropolitan cities, of course, that costs so much more money than in the U.S. At least than Texas here, where I am. Uh, that is not to compare to certain neighborhood here in Houston, though. Just on average, say, so-called middle class neighborhood. So anyway, that's about what you have versus what you don't have, and if you do compare that to a lot of, I guess, examples out there. So once again, it's not about to stay clear of vanity just so that I am so noble, so high up there. No, it's not about that. It's about if you don't chase after the vanity, you can actually live a life whole lot happier, because hey, there's what you need and there's what you want. And if you compare to what others have that you don't, well, let's just say on one hand, it does provide the motivation for you to, I guess, work harder. But if you work so hard every day, 16 hours a day, almost all your life, a lot of, life you probably missed out with your family, your loved ones. I don't know. I mean, that's exactly what I guess Taoism teaching is talking about right here. So that's about have versus don't have. But then the second half, or the last four Chinese characters out of the nine, the total nine we're talking today, 难易相成. What that means, the difficulty things and the easier things, basically, they coexist and only, becomes meaningful when one is in presence. By comparison, the other, is there, right? So when you are doing something and you thought you accomplished a lot and you got this full satisfaction at the end of the day of a work process, right? Whatever that is, that could be creative writing for literature, that could be visual art, or that could be just some craftsmanship, or your gardening, whatever, right? And you at the end of the day, you sit down, with all that sweat out or off, and then you're sipping your tea or coffee or talking to your friend or family, and you say, you know what, I've done this and that, totally, to reflect your satisfaction of accomplishment. And then what you hear from the other side is, oh, that's easy. And obviously, you're not going to be pleased by hearing that kind of comments. But then think about it. What is easy? It might be easy, really, truly, for someone offered that comment, because for that someone, that was just a piece of cake, right? Given different background, different skill set, different whatever experience, and hey, for me, maybe it took me quite an effort to get here. So maybe easy for you. But then also it could be, one scenario is it's easier said than done. That comment from someone just basically throw the comment out there, perceived as easy, because that someone never even tried. So either way, if you actually take that comment too seriously, it's gonna ruin your day, right? So basically, if you kind of smile at, and basically Yeah, I guess it could be easy for you, right? I mean, hey, that wouldn't hurt. I mean, it would not make the other side feel bad, nor would it make yourself feel bad, right? So this is really, if you look at the things, from the point of view, from the angle as a Taoist, you pretty much basically shake off a lot of hard feelings, somewhat easier, right? So comparative, easy compared to what, right? So this is what I guess we talk about, the have versus don't have, the more difficult versus, the more easier. It's all by comparison. Um, I guess, I'm sure you all have your own, life experience for analogies, and perhaps I could share some here. I did already share something about, my life experience back in the hardcore communist China as a young boy. But then let's see what else, as far as like, have versus don't have. Uh, I guess when I was younger, I started my own business when I was in my early 30s. I arrived here in the U.S. Uh, before I turned 29. So I started my business 5 years after I arrived here, and of course, in back then, came out of the such a hardcore communist state, and basically swimming in the deep ocean of capitalism. I felt like, oh man, only the sky was the limit. And of course, I had lots of ego at that age, early 30s. And, I wanted to have a lot. Not necessarily like, in terms of a bigger house or a bigger car, but I wanted to prove to myself I can do a lot. Okay, so what is a lot? I did not have much, I guess, specific plan, right? Whatever, hey, sky's the limit. Just uh, do what you can. And be honest with you, I was thinking about building a, business empire. I just have to be honest with you. That was, you know, part of what I was thinking, try to pursue. And well, obviously that did not work out. And back in, I think, 2004, and this was I guess a lot of people talking about luck, but then I guess I want to share with you what I think about luck, and especially now after certain study of the Taoism teachings. Um, when I started my own business, given the background of the training in maritime, of course, I started my business firstly in maritime business, but just so happened the same year, the maritime industry plunged in the worst ever in the history that basically in my lifetime. It was even worse than today. So that was the time I started my own business. So I struggled a little bit. And then it was really just not just me, just everybody in the maritime industry. This we're talking about the very early 1990s. So, okay. So I migrated into IT industry. Back then, about half of the Chinese in America were in IT industry, regardless of whatever their training were. We all became, somewhat IT, professionals. So for me, of course, I got into the business. I did not go right into software as most Chinese in America did, but I went into IT business. And of course, it took quite some effort for me to convert myself, technically into the, an IT guy, quote unquote. And eventually, I actually began to get a good taste of it, and actually started, I guess, landing some good contracts, and I was traveling around the world. Basically, provided lots of exposures, which was good. And it was not about money. It was just, basically, you travel around, you see different part of the world. And of course, that was what the ancient Chinese elites were supposed to do. You do intensive reading, which I did when I was a young boy. I had all the time in the world, didn't have school, didn't have nothing to do, and I was not allowed to go anywhere. So I did a lot, very extensive reading. But then this part basically, completed my travel extensively every week, to where, to and from everywhere. So anyway, that was great, right? So that was a great migration, hop from one industry to another. But then IT plunged in 2002, I think, somewhere. So that's about 10 years or a decade later. Of course, during that decade, I've seen a lot of successful stories. It's just young kids, younger than myself. They throw some good idea, and then they land some VC investments, and boom, they have their own successful business stories. So finally, I got on a project that had very good prospects. So I went to Silicon Valley, and there was a very famous VC guy, and I had a lunch with him, a very quick lunch. And at the end of lunch, the guy told me, "Okay, I think we have a deal. I will place $3 million in your project. You're on your way to China, so come back and talk to me. With the deal you strike with the Chinese." So I went to China, and I had a very good arrangement. After a couple of meetings with the same party that I targeted, with the good connection. And just at that time, the Black Monday or whatever it's called, or it was called, basically IT market crashed. A lot of successful stories ended, in live short cycle span. And, I was barely hanging, basically paying salary, with the smaller staff in office until the last day. I just had to close the door of my own office, basically moved back home with about 2,000 computers and lots of files and file cabinets. And that was some gloomy day, that was, I was not very happy, let's just say, moving home. And a couple of months later, I, basically went for interview, and then I got my job as a 4PL manager at a bigger manufacturing place. And then, after that, basically I hopped between, I guess, one or two, I think two manufacturing companies for basically a logistic manager type of job. And eventually I decided, no, I'm not really cut out to be somebody's employee, because I'm used to pursue my own vision rather than taking orders from somebody else, and to do something I like, but it's not the thing that I care. So I started, I'm gonna go back and do my own thing. But this time I went back to become a maritime or charter and broker again. So I went back to, I guess, I came out of logistic, but I went back to maritime. But this time it was specifically to, engage in the upstream sector of oil, gas, and chemical industry. And, then the business went down again because the maritime industry went down again. And so I started, accepting contracts, and, basically start doing some consultation services. So basically, you see, I've been around a lot. And in between all this, I also, I mentioned it before, I owned and operated a trade journal in China, and we were the first trade periodical, offered completely free, uh, to the subscribers in China. Nobody did that before we did, and we were the first one as the technical trade journal for the broadcasting and TV industry, for the technical engineers and all that in China too. But you know, we thought we had a legal arrangement, and eventually we found out somehow that was not, and we got kicked out of the country. So that was that, right? And also, I have done the work for Beijing TV. Basically, I guess I wrote some script for them and did the I guess anchors and did some documentary on camera presenter, and we tried to co-produce some shows, documentaries together, which did not work out. How policy goes in China today. But basically, with all this experience, that was quite diversified between all the different industries, and I had my solo art shows of oil paintings and contemporary, I guess, multimedia artworks, both here in Houston and in Beijing, China. So as far as the I guess business empire, it never even came close. But do I regret that? No, because at the first thought, you may think, oh, this guy had very bad luck, but I don't really look at that way today, because just because I was I guess short on luck when I was pursuing certain things, it actually provide both the motivation and the opportunity for me to pursue other things. So for me, actually, this part never changed. I would think it would be quite a regret and a shame at the last minute of our life, before we kick the bucket, and we think, I wonder what would it be like if I pursue certain things that I was interested, but then I forgot because I was so stuck with something else, right? So I have tried a whole bunch of different things, right? And I guess my latest venture was teaching at a university, and I'm not sure that was altogether a satisfactory experience, but hey, that was an experience, anyway. So all that, I think, amounting to something, basically for me, it's like, okay, try to be a complete man, and to live a full life. That's what I think is I guess for me, that's the perfect balance to strike between the have and don't have. Basically, have the materialized, a lot of whatever it is, and that you need to count, look at your balance sheet or whatever, or to have the life experience that is so rich, right? You want to be a rich man in rich life experience, or a big bank account or balance sheet or whatever it is. That's totally, up to you differently. So what is have? What is, don't have? That is totally, perception differently, varies between the different individuals, your own, I guess, meaning of life as defined by yourself. So that is something about the have and don't have. And then what is easy, what is, difficult. I don't think I need to, spend much time, not in this session anyway, because I think we all have our own experience on what is easy, what is I guess, difficult, right? So we'll just wrap up here for this session. Until next one, ciao.